Late at night, inside the quiet corridors of the Ouagadougou presidential residence, Ibrahim Traoré felt a strange heaviness in his chest. The air was cold, but his thoughts were burning. In just a few minutes, he would be meeting someone he had only seen on screens, someone whose voice carried weight even across oceans. Bishop Robert Barron, a thinker, a teacher, a man whose words often reshaped how people viewed faith, reason, and the world. But tonight's meeting was not a normal diplomatic conversation. No media, no cameras, no officials. Just two men who wanted to talk about something far older and far deeper than politics. Traoré kept walking slowly down the hall, and for some reason he felt like he was heading towards something that might change him. He didn't know how, he didn't know why, but he felt it. It was the kind of intuition leaders rarely admit to, but always experience. He reached a small, dimly lit room, opened the door, and saw Bishop Barron standing with a worn rosary in his hand, his eyes calm. Like someone who had seen the world from the inside out, Traoré sat down across from him before he could say a single word. Bishop Barron spoke softly. "Mr. President," he said, "tonight I want to speak to you not as a bishop and not to a president, but as one human soul to another." Traoré raised an eyebrow. The directness was unexpected. Barron continued, "You wanted to speak about Jesus, not religion, not churches, Jesus?" That was exactly what Traoré wanted. It was almost unnerving how accurately Barron sensed it. Traoré leaned forward. "I want truth," he said plainly. "Not a European version of truth, not a political interpretation, not a missionary message, just truth." And then he asked the question that had been sitting in his mind ever since his childhood. Why does the world talk about Jesus as if he belonged to one people, one culture, one side of history? Did Jesus come for all of us, or only for some of us? Barron gently wrapped his rosary around his fingers and answered without hesitation. "Jesus did not come for a tribe," he said. "He did not come for a race. He did not come for an empire. Jesus came for the human heart. And a heart has no nationality." Traoré stared at him for a long moment. It was an answer he expected, but the certainty in Barron's voice made it feel different, heavier, truer. "But Bishop," he said, "if that is true, why is Jesus often presented as a European hero? Why do different nations recreate him in their own image? Is that really faith or is it ownership?" Barron smiled faintly. "Every culture," he said, "tries to understand Jesus using its own language. A fisherman imagines him differently from a philosopher. A farmer imagines him differently from a king. A child imagines him differently from a scholar. This is not distortion, it is human limitation. But the real Jesus is not owned by any civilization. He is too vast for that." Traoré felt a strange calm enter him, but he was not satisfied. "So what is the real Jesus?" he asked. Barron paused. It seemed he wanted to choose his words carefully. "The real Jesus," he said slowly, "is the one who confronts you, not comforts you." The words hit Traoré harder than he expected. Barron continued, "People often reshape Jesus into a gentle symbol, a soft presence. But if you read his life honestly, he was a disruptor. He challenged kings, priests, systems, traditions, and even his own followers. He loved deeply, but his love was not weak, it was demanding. It asked people to transform." Traoré felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. "So you're saying Jesus wasn't a passive figure?" "Passive?" Barron shook his head. "No, Jesus was dangerous, but only to lies." The room went silent. Traoré folded his hands. "If that is true," he asked, "why does religion today feel small, divided, weak, empty?" Barron nodded, as if he had waited for that exact question. "Because," he said, "many people stopped looking for Jesus and started looking for justification. Jesus does not justify human divisions. Humans try to justify their divisions with Jesus. That is the difference." Traoré sank back in his chair. It felt like someone had opened a door inside him. He looked at Barron intently. "Then tell me something," he said. "What do you think Jesus would say to a world full of conflict, inequality, and injustice today?" Barron raised his eyes, and for the first time, His expression became serious, almost stern. He would say what he said 2,000 years ago, Barron replied. That the world is broken because humans are broken. And humans are broken because truth has been replaced with convenience. Traore held his breath. And you believe, he asked slowly, that Jesus is the answer? Barron shook his head. No, Jesus is the question. Humanity must answer. Traore felt jolted. Barron leaned closer. The question is simple, he said. Do you want truth, even if it costs you everything? That is what Jesus asked every person he met, rich or poor, powerful or powerless. And what do people usually answer? Traore whispered. They say yes, Barron said. Until the truth asks something difficult. Traore sighed, rubbing his forehead. So you're saying Jesus forces people to confront themselves? Yes, Barron said. And that confrontation changes nations more than any revolution. Traore looked at the floor. I am leading a country, he said. People look at me as if I have answers. But inside I am still searching, still questioning, still unsure. Barron replied softly, that uncertainty is not a weakness. It is the beginning of wisdom. Jesus never asked people to pretend they were perfect. He only asked them to be honest. Traore closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he said something he hadn't planned to say. What scares me, he whispered, is that people think faith is a tool, something to control others, not something to transform themselves. Barron nodded slowly. Faith becomes dangerous, he said, when people try to use it without understanding it. Jesus did not come to create domination. He came to create conscience. Traore felt that sentence travel through him like a slow wave. He looked at Barron again. So what should a leader like me do? He asked. Barron placed the rosary gently on the table. Lead with truth, he said. Not the truth that benefits you. The truth that challenges you. The world has had enough leaders who seek power. What it needs are leaders who seek clarity. Traore breathed deeply. And Jesus gives that clarity? Jesus gives a mirror, Barron answered. Clarity is what you see in it. The clock ticked softly in the background. The quietness of the room felt almost sacred. Traore or E. Acute leaned forward. Bishop, he said, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why Jesus? Why not just morality? Philosophy? Humanity? Why still him? Barron looked at him gently, with eyes that seemed to carry decades of reflection. Because, he said, morality teaches us rules. Philosophy teaches us logic. Humanity teaches us compassion. But Jesus teaches us transformation. Morality tells you what is right. Jesus tells you how to become someone who chooses what is right even when no one is watching. Traore stared at him, stunned by the simplicity and depth of the statement. And that, Barron said quietly, is why Jesus cannot be claimed by any nation. Because transformation is universal. Traore slowly stood up, feeling the weight of every word. You have given me something to think about, he said. Barron smiled warmly. No, Mr. President, he said. Jesus has given you something to think about. I only helped you hear it. As Barron prepared to leave, Traore stopped him with one final question. What do you think Jesus would say to me right now, at this exact moment? Barron looked into his eyes deeply, sincerely. He would say, Barron whispered, do not be afraid of truth. Traore felt the air leave his chest. And for the first time in years, he felt his mind not heavy with power but open. The door closed behind Bishop Barron, but the question remained in the room, echoing long after he left. Do not be afraid of truth. And in that silent echo, something in Ibrahim Traoré began to change.